I'm standing. There's a light breeze from the west. The sky is blue, but for bits of cloud teased away from yonder areas. But for the here and now, all is well, and all shall be well, and all is well. Scanning the panorama, I can see in the western horizon Nabana Biola Mountains, whose names means the blessed lips. They roll down through Connemara to Galway Bay. Then in the east, the Burren turns from its tip black head back to the giant backdrop of the cliffs of Moher. The sea is the middle ground, as flat as a mirror today. Ferries streak through, small and slowly, from Rossaveel and Doolin. The graveyard on Inisheer has excellent aspect. It's raised high up on a mountain of sand. That same sand has been there for at least 1,000 years. Amidst it and the marron grass, shells are strewn, empty limpets, mussels, periwinkles, cockles, razor shells. As you walk from the road up to the entrance gate, you walk through this midden, the remains of monks' dinners. Once you pass through the gate, after a few steps, there, half submerged in the graveyard, you notice the empty ruin of Temple Coivon, Kevin's church, founded in the 10th century. The unroofed dry stone walls had been preserved by the surrounding sand and were revealed again in the 1980s when the tailwind of a hurricane sparked the excavation of the site we see today. The result is an accumulated mound of sand, its headstones maintained by marram grass, gravity and time, with a hollowed atrium, nave and inner sanctum. For one day of the year, the graveyard is populated by islanders to celebrate an open-air mass. On June 14th, Pattern Day, the islanders sit around the slopes nearest the oldest graves, looking on as mass is said below. I don't go anymore. I don't even know why I'm here today. Some residual feeling, perhaps. But from time to time, I find myself up here. Sometimes I think it's just for the change of scenery. I feel like I'm trespassing. Right now, I'm standing near a plot, near the edge of the graveyard towards the back, where you can see the sand fall away from the outside of the flimsy wire fence. There are clumps, mossy with thinning grass, thrown together. There's no headstone. Instead, a wrinkled rock, like one of the many found all along the shore. This grave, barely marked, is the grave of Martin Sharry. My name is Martin Sharry. And for as long as I can remember, I've been going to Inisheer, Aran Islands. One summer when I was 6 years old, there were 3 Martin Sharrys under the one roof. There was Dado, my grandfather, who built and owned the house, my uncle and myself. The house remains today very much as it was back then. Still the cold stone floor, the thick lime-washed walls, the open fire, a gas light that gave a yellow glow when the electricity went. Beside that, a coil of yellow plastic for killing flies, a dresser full with delf, an array of multicolour cups, jugs, plates, platters, egg cups, mugs. There was a grandfather clock with a picture of George Washington and his wife at their residence, Mount Vernon. Its tick-tock was loud throughout the house. every now and then it needed to be rewound. There was an attic with books, ropes, nets, old batteries, tools, glumachs, small wooden frames for wrapping fishing line, an old mirror mottled and warped with an over-ornate frame. Back then there was no fridge. Instead, a steel bucket full of water, encased in a box of cement walls with a wooden board for a lid. This in turn was housed in a small shed. I feel through the darkness and cold, lifting the lid, and see the cold dead eye of a mackerel. There's no toilet either, just another bucket. Always the flies and the stink to be mixed with the ashes, rotting waste and sand. There was a corner in the garden where this mix was dumped. Every now and then we'd get a donkey and cart and bring it to a field to make new earth. No TV, no radiators. Us kids were outside most of the days, hanging around with other kids. Regulars here for their summer holidays, playing on the beach or inventing adventures. Playing cops and robbers in O'Brien's castle, circling the island over and over. I could see my grandfather, Martin Sharry. He's in his 80s. He sits in that chair, facing the fire, back to the door. And no one else dares to sit in that chair. Giving out, in Irish of course, about us kids coming and going through the wrong door. Oh, there was uproar in the house if the wrong door was used. It depended on rules I didn't understand, which at the time I attributed to the language barrier. Now, I'm not so sure. Something to do with the north wind and exits and entrances, to wait for someone to take away whatever curse was brought. His right thumb in a black leather pouch. He refused to see a doctor. The navy vest, the tweed trousers, the cap, heavy smell of lanolin and sweat, smoking a pipe, staring into the fire. His lantern jaw clamped shut, as if coming down for a storm. Born in 1901, died in 1986. Married to Kate Griffin, born 1902, died in 1990. When it was raining, you couldn't go outside. I remember the whole family staring into the fire, mesmerised by flames and watching the wrack gathered from the shore crackle and hiss until we got a television. But before that, there was the intermittent murmur of spoken Irish. The other generations, or more generally on Radio na Gaeltachta, which ranged between the drone of Shanos or the inexplicable talk of news and death notices. Irish was different here. The odd time there'd be visitors, usually relations, and they would join the rest around the fire and venture a few words as Gaeilge. I'd feel awkward and eat more bread and drink more tea. We did impressions of this strange speech and adapted their weird triple barrel names into our Ballymun slang. They'd attempt to engage us by tracing our genealogy and testing us on what cousins we knew, or neighbours even. Martin Sharry, his son, my uncle, is less visible. He stays in his room, only leaving either to eat or to use the toilet. That was his chair, and he'd wait for it to be vacated before he'd eat. And he'd eat the same thing every day. Spam, processed cheese, bread and tea at around 12 o'clock every day. He wears a uniform of grey, navy, black, bulk of abdomen and withered limbs, hair plastered black with shoe polish, cardigan and vest with threadbare slacks, greying black socks falling loose, revealing pale thin ankles cross-legged, reaching for a cigarette, the flick of flame, the cupped hands, the in-breath of smoke. Wall-eyed, One eye studies flame, while the other is away to his right. The burning embers in the fire. To his left, a picture of Jesus pointing at his bleeding heart. He looks pale and weak, eyes to the heavens. With his crown of thorns and a halo, illuminated script radiates from his body. Messages from the Sermon on the Mount. Meanwhile, Martin chain smokes, blowing rings into the corner of the ceiling, already stained and sticky with the dripping buds of tar. For years now, when scribbling in idleness, I'd automatically find myself drawing the scene described above. Once, when he was away in the mainland in some hospital, no one else was in the house. I eased open the door to his room. First thing that hits you is the clogging stench. The brown dark, the pulled curtains. There were medals and prayers and rosary beads, although he never went to Mass. And jars of pills left on a table in the front of a mirror. It was a portrait of Saint Martin, which took me by surprise. I didn't imagine he was black. But the windowsill, there were coat hangers that had been untwisted, and corks were stuck in some of the ends. They were rearranged into different shapes, and jars and bottles were connected. And there, old copies of The Star and the Sun and a small wireless radio. Martin was my godfather. Didn't mean much. But on the day of my confirmation, he put a blue £50 note in my hand. It's the first time I'd seen one for real. I was stunned. He rarely spoke, let alone gave anything to us kids. I was quickly made to give the £50 back. He mustn't have realised what he was doing, I was told. They used to say, God love him, what could he do? He was helpless. Though he had been good with his hands once. I've just entered my one-bedroom bottom-floor flat on Richmond Hill, Cork. Shut the door, turned on the light, turned off the light, got on my hands and knees before lying face down flat, fists clenched, mashed energy mashing, feverish wimping wretch. In the dark, on the cold tiles. Nobody knowing that I'm doing this. I know there's nothing to extinguish. It's not really real. It's in my head. There's no reason. I've just come for a walk by the river with a good friend. There were swans, we held hands. That was fine, it's fine. But I'm here on the floor now, hit by something out of nowhere. I can even hear the city noises, the traffic. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up.